Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In this series of lessons, we are going over attachment and we are understanding conceptually all the topics given for the latest syllabus 2025 specification. I hope you've already watched the videos on animal studies of attachment and learning theory of attachment because this is the third lesson in the series. Before we begin, I want you to know that I am a private tutor and school teacher for A level psychology since more than 12 years now. So, if you want to schedule your classes with me, you can reach out to me. My email ID and WhatsApp number are available in the description box and pinned comment below. I also sell notes for A level psychology, so my store link is also available. Let's begin with today's lesson, in which we are going to learn about Bowlby's monotropic theory of attachment. As always, first I will explain all the key concepts of the theory to you and then we'll go over an evaluation. So we are going to cover both AO1 and AO3 in this video. If you need exam strategy, you need to see how to write AO1, AO2 and AO3 answers. That's application and research methods answers also for your papers. Lots of exam strategy videos and past paper solutions are available on my channel, in which I have not only covered the past papers and various types of questions step by step. I have explained to you how to solve those questions. So do watch those videos as well. Okay, let's begin with Bowlby's monotropic theory. Mono means one and tropic means attachment. So literally this is the theory of one attachment. As always, let's begin with the basic idea. What is Bowlby trying to tell us here about attachment? Just to quickly revise, what is attachment? It is an emotional bond between a caregiver and a baby. Okay, always keep this in mind throughout the attachment unit. So, what is Bowlby telling us about this bond? Firstly, he's telling us that attachment is innate. Innate is a word you will see many times in psychology. It means inborn, natural, unlearned. Okay, so right away, this is in direct contradiction of the learning theory of attachment, because that theory tells us attachment is learned. If you haven't watched that video already, do watch it because you need to contrast Bowlby's theory with the learning theory. Now, why would something be inborn? Because it has some survival value. There is a full perspective in psychology, or a way of understanding things, which is called the evolutionary perspective. That tells us that whichever behaviors we are born with, those behaviors are important for adaptation to the environment. They help us to survive. Our ancestors have passed on those behaviors to us so that our chances of death can be minimized and our chances of living can be maximized. You will learn more about this perspective throughout different units that we do. So, what value can be there of attachment in survival? That is what Bowlby has mainly explored. So let's understand the concept of monotropy to understand why we would attach to survive. Monotropy means forming one main attachment with a primary caregiver which is more important than others. When a human infant is born, they tend to have multiple caregivers. In most cases, unless she is unavailable, the main caregiver is the mother. Why we would call her the main caregiver? Because she will feed the child, and otherwise also culturally most cultures mothers are expected to take care of the baby all through the day. So the mother always has to be present with the baby. But there are other caregivers also. The father is also there, siblings might be there, grandparents might be there. They are also caregivers. Literally, they give care to the baby. They also look after many aspects of the baby. But this one, the first one, the mother, is the primary attachment figure, the main one, for reasons I explained to you. And according to Bowlby, this is the most important attachment, this primary one. We will see further why he feels that it is the most important, because he feels there are very strong implications of this attachment, not only for survival, as we were seeing, but also for how the child's future will shape up. So when he says this is the main attachment, not only from evolutionary perspective, there are actual consequences in the child's later life of what quality this attachment is. That's why it's main or primary. Bowlby also believes that there's a hierarchy of attachments. A hierarchy is an ordered arrangement of things. Many times you must be seeing this pyramid shape is used to represent a hierarchy. So something will be at the bottom, then something will go upwards. There'll be many levels. So he feels there are many levels of attachments. The primary one will go right on the top, like the mother attachment, primary one, which we were just seeing. Others are somewhere lower on the hierarchy. Others are not as important. So, a mother and baby attachment, that attachment is very influential and determining for the baby's future. But the attachment the baby has with their father or with their grandmother, grandfather, brother, sister, that is not going to have that much of an influence on the baby in the future, which is why those attachments are placed lower than the hierarchy. Simply saying, other than the attachment with the primary caregiver, all the other attachments are less important and less impactful. Now we saw that this attachment has survival value. Let's understand that survival value further. Survival value, think about an infant as being a completely helpless entity when it is born. You must be remembering in the Lorenz video, Animal Studies of Attachment, I told you that at least in birds and in most animals, there is mobility when they are born. They can start walking behind their mother immediately. Babies can't even move. Human babies are immobile, they can't even move. They need someone to pick them and carry them around. If someone is not there to help them move around, how will they move? They'll be stuck in one place, can't even fend food for themselves, they'll die like that. So they need someone to pick them, carry them, feed them. They are absolutely helpless on their own. So that's why that tendency to attach is there, or that behavior to attach is there, because the baby is so helpless that only if they can attach to a figure who can help them out thoroughly, then only they can survive. So that's why babies are born with certain behaviors. You can see any small baby, frequently you will see they are crying, they are smiling, and that triggers caregiving responses. Many times you'll hear a small baby crying. It can be annoying, so it must be coming to your notice. They cry pretty loudly. And what happens when they cry? The mother comes running to see why is my baby crying. Then supposing she sees, oh, the baby is hungry, she starts feeding. She sees the baby is uncomfortable. So she checks the diaper of the baby, whether she should change it. So, this crying behavior, has anyone taught it to the baby? Has anyone given training to the baby that whenever you need attention, you start crying, then the caregiver will come? No, again, it's inborn, it's innate. And why is it innate again? So that the caregiver gives attention because the baby is helpless and cannot get food for itself or cannot clean up for itself. This is the means of getting the caregiver to come towards the baby. Another example is smiling. The baby will smile, in return, the caregiver will also smile. A strong attachment will form. The stronger the attachment, the more the chances that whenever the baby needs help, the caregiver will come. And in this way, the baby survives because someone comes to clean it, to feed it, to see that nothing is going wrong with the baby. In case the baby is about to get injured or has got injured, someone comes to give medical care to the baby. Otherwise, the baby would have not survived. So these social releases, these expressions like crying, smiling, these are inborn in the baby so that attachment or bonding can form with the mother and the baby has no problem in surviving. So this is the basic idea of the theory. A little more we need to know. Unfortunately, in our syllabus, they have done away with what was then the older syllabus, Schaffer and Emerson's theory of attachment. So, some things now we will understand within Bowlby's theory only because it's not given separately. But Bowlby has borrowed a lot from Schaffer and Emerson's research. Schaffer and Emerson had shown that attachment is two-way. Caregivers and infants, they interact in two ways. Like so far, what we've been seeing, we might get the impression that it's the baby who's always crying, smiling, and the mother who's always coming and checking out what the baby needs. So it's like the baby is the one in distress who needs help, and the mother is the help provider, which is true. That is their role. But it's not as if the baby is all passive and the mother is all active. We should not get that impression. The baby is also very active, in the sense that the baby also strategically uses crying and smiling type of behaviors as needed to get the mother's attention. Like we saw, for example, smiling will strengthen attachment bonds. So that is why the baby is using it, ensuring that it gets the caregiver's attention. In this way, the caregiver, if we look at the emotional response of the caregiver, though we don't explore it in detail, that's not the main concern right now. Even the caregiver feels accepted, feels an experience of love, feels like an important attachment is forming for them also. It's not only the baby who's gaining an attachment or a bond, it's the caregiver also who's gaining an attachment or a bond with their baby. So both are equal parties. It's being reciprocated, means it's a give and take relationship. Very loosely, if you have to think of it, if the baby likes the mother coming towards the baby, the mother also likes the baby calling out to her. So both have good emotional investment in the relationship. Now there are some other very important ideas which Bowlby has given related to monotropic attachment. Please note that some of these ideas, like internal working model, they are elaborated further. Later, we see Bowlby's deprivation theory. If you see your specification, that is given as a later topic. There, you get to see about it in much more detail. But all of Bowlby's theories are continuous. Like, first, he gave the monotropic theory, then, stemming from that only, he's given internal working model and deprivation. So, as such, they are not disconnected. That's why a little bit we have to know here also under monotropic theory, and then full-fledged development of that part we see in the next section. Bowlby said that there is a critical period of attachment. So, from this, we will be able to transition from monotropic to deprivation and internal working model. You remember Lawrence had given a critical period of attachment in imprinting. Bowlby has borrowed this idea from there. In geese, we saw the attachment period is very short, just few days or weeks. But in humans, it is fairly longer because after all, human life is also longer than birds. In humans, the critical attachment period is up to 2.5 years, according to Bowlby. Just to remember what a critical period is, critical period is that time duration in which some behavior or ability has to be established, otherwise, it cannot be established later. So, it is a limited time period up to 2.5 years in which attachment behavior has to form between the primary caregiver and the baby. If it is not formed in this period, then it cannot be achieved later. Let's think of an example. Let's say the mother is absent for some reason. Unfortunately, the mother has passed away after giving birth to the baby. Or otherwise, the mother has fallen very ill, so she cannot take care of the baby at all. Or for some reason, she has separated and walked off even from the baby. In these cases, the baby is not able to form an attachment with the mother even till they become 2.5 years because the mother is just not available. According to Bowlby, let's say somehow the mother returns after 2.5 years, or some substitute mother comes in her place, but the baby has already crossed 2.5 years. Then the baby will not be able to form that type of a strong bond that it would have before 2.5 years of age. It's become impossible now for the baby to form that attachment because the social releases period has gone away. Those crying, smiling type of behaviors which used to help establish the bond, now the baby has become mature to do those type of behaviors. So it is no longer possible. And are there any consequences of this? Yes, that's why it's called critical period. It's very important. If the attachment is not formed in this period, there will be very bad impact on the intellect, emotionality, and sociality of the baby. This is the idea that will be further developed in the maternal deprivation hypothesis. Right now, why we've seen critical period? Because monotropic attachment needs to be formed in this period. But if that is not the case, we say deprivation has taken place. The baby has been deprived of the monotropic attachment, and then these are the consequences. So, related to this, there is one more idea, internal working model. Why this primary attachment is so important, and again we are seeing future implications. How come it has future implications? Beyond childhood, what impact can a monotropic figure have? What happens is, according to Bowlby, again, remember what we had seen in Lorentz study, then you'll be able to relate with this. Whatever attachment is formed with the caregiver, whatever quality of attachment is there with them, which can be either good or bad, that is the quality of attachment that becomes a template for the individual. It's like a mental template. And they will operate from this mental template when they have to make up their grown up attachments in adulthood. I'll explain with a simple example because I know right now it seems abstract. Let's say a baby and their primary caregiver have a very trusting relationship, very positive relationship, very strongly bonded. What is the template that forms in the baby's mind? Template you can think of like a schema, or if you're not familiar with that term, you can think of an impression. What impression forms in the baby's mind? That all relationships are very trusting and very loving. Meaning that the baby had a trusting and loving relation with their mother, so they've come to believe that all relationships are like this. This is a pattern that has formed in their mind. Now the same baby becomes a grown up. Say they become 18 years, 20 years of age. This pattern still exists in them. The baby mother bonding. We don't know if literally the mother is still available or not. Do they see each other as much as they used to earlier or not? Doesn't matter. What is important is the mental impression that has formed in the baby. So physical existence of that relationship is still not required. The impression which is in the mind of that individual, now that is going to operate in adult relationships. So now this grown up individual, now the one who's become 18 to 20 years, is forming, say, a romantic relationship. Say it's a man who's trying to form a romantic relationship with a woman. What sort of a relationship he expects from her? Trusting and loving, because that is the template which is there in his mind. That is the sort of relation he had with his mother. So that is what he will bring into his grown up relationships. Of course, not necessary. The woman will also reciprocate the same trust and love, but he will begin on this note. And there are high chances that he will be reciprocated with this. He will give trust and love in his relationships, so likely he will form good relationships. The opposite of this can be some individual has had a very poor quality of attachment with their mother. Say the mother was abusive, the mother was neglectful, didn't care about the baby. What is the template formed in this individual's mind? Relationships are untrustworthy. We can't trust other people whether they'll care for us or not, and they are transactional. If the other person wants, they feel like it, they give attention to us. If they don't give attention to us. So no love, no trust. When they grow up, they become an adult, they carry this with them in their grown up relationships. So now say they've become 18, 20 years of age. They are looking for a romantic partner. What sort of a relation do they want to establish? Transactional. Do they trust their partner? No, because this was the sort of relationship which they had in their childhood. Likely, they will not be able to form a good relationship with their partner because they are beginning on a very poor note. So, right away, here only you should know. That is why Bowlby was telling us there can be long term damage if attachments are not formed in the critical period. In fact, now we are seeing if a poor attachment is formed in the critical period. So, attachment is there, but it's not of a good quality. That also has damaging consequences for the individual. Do keep these ideas in mind if you want to do relationships next year as an option. If you'll be taking that, that will help you out. And also definitely for the topic we are going to see very soon, Ainsworth's strange situation test. In that there is a discussion of attachment types, secure, insecure. Right now I'm not using that terminology, I'm avoiding it, but we are going to see that very soon. So these ideas will help you to easily understand what is secure, insecure attachment, and they are further classified also. So it'll just become easy to grasp all of that. Okay, now we saw that because I know lots of concepts are coming in this theory, just a quick revision. There is something called monotropic attachment, attachment with one primary caregiver, which is very influential on the baby. That has to form in a critical period up to 2.5 years, otherwise, later it cannot be established. And the quality and nature of that relationship can determine what sort of adult relationships will form later. So, this is what we have seen so far. Now, the next concept related to this is internal working model effect. This template, which we just saw, which forms in the individual's mind, it's said to be an internal working model. That's the name given to it, the impression or the template formed in the person's mind of how relations should be. Now, what is the effect of this template? As such, I've already explained to you, but let's see formally how it's written. It influences future relationships, like the examples I gave you of romantic attachment, it influences those type of relationships. In fact, it can also influence parenting style. This person, when they were 2.5 years, they formed a trusting relation with their mother. Now they have grown up, they have become a parent themselves. Say it's a man, he's become a father today. Will he form a trusting and loving relation with his child now? Very high chances. So, because as a baby he got trust and love from his mother, as a father, he will show trust and love towards his baby in turn. On the other hand, if there was a poor relationship with his mother when he was a child, today he's a father, he's likely to establish a poor relationship with his baby in turn. So, in terms of future relationships, the template which is formed, not only it influences romantic relationships, but also parenting styles or the way the individual will be as a parent to their own children in the future. Finally, Bowlby has given continuity hypothesis. Continuity hypothesis is not a new idea, but it just shows the smooth transition of relationships. Whatever we were seeing just now, that in childhood there's a type of relationship, then that goes on impacting in adulthood also. This shows continuity. Means Bowlby is trying to encourage us to think in terms of what is in childhood that only transitions into adulthood. Other researchers have found these things to be discontinuous. Like if you see something like learning theory, which we saw last time, in that the mother is like a cupboard. It's called cupboard love theory. So in childhood the baby gets feeding from the mother, that is only attachment, and it's required that time only. When the child grows up, they will be able to get their own food, they don't need food from the mother, no attachment, attachment is finished. So there's discontinuity in that theory between what is happening in childhood and what is going on to happen in later adulthood. But Bowlby believes that what happens in childhood directly impacts and continuously impacts how the individual is growing up until their adulthood. It goes into their adulthood. In fact, it will carry on till their death also, what type of relationships they have. So there is a continuity in attachment throughout life. And that is how we should perceive it according to Bowlby. We should not see it in disconnected, unlike what learning theory sees it. Okay, so these were the chief ideas in Bowlby's monotropic theory. It's a little term heavy theory, I would say. Some terms need to be remembered, like monotropy, social releasers, critical period, IWM. But overall, it's not difficult to understand. So I hope it's come across that way to you. Now let's look at the evaluation. Okay, just to remind you, I know for those of you who are watching all the lessons, this would be a little repetitive, but it's important. How we see evaluation is in ideal exam format. So we see two strengths, two weaknesses of every topic. At least one of our evaluation points has a counterpoint, And at least one of our evaluation points is research evidence. At least one of the points is about issues and debates, because sometimes we need to answer discuss questions in the paper. And for those questions, it's ideal to have an issue and debate as well. In fact, that's why that difference is kept in the paper between AS and AL questions, 12 markers versus 16 markers. And we always follow the peel format in writing: point, evidence, evaluation, link. If necessary, C, counterpoint. So this is how we are going to do monotropic evaluation also. In case you need further orientation on how to write evaluations, please watch any of the exam strategy videos on my channel. In those videos, I've explained what is the peel format and how much you need to write for AO3 and all. I won't be able to go in much detail of the general format in this video. I'll explain to you everything with respect to Bowlby's theory. As far as Bowlby's theory is concerned, there is research support to evidence the theory. If you want, you can take Lorentz study also. After all, his ideas have come from Lorentz and critical period and impact, like sexual imprinting, impact, continuity, early imprinting which took place in the births that in later life determined their sexual imprinting. Those sort of ideas are there which directly support Bowlby's ideas of IWM effects and continuity hypothesis. So if you find it easy to take Lorentz because you've already seen in detail, definitely take it. Just make sure to put it in the correct format and relevantly. What some students do is they will just describe Lorentz study for its own sake. They'll not keep on pointing out which aspects of that study are correlating with which aspects of Bowlby's theory. So don't take it in a descriptive format. Take it to show how there is support for Bowlby's theory. Okay, I have taken a different study here, Schaffer and Emerson, which I already told you is most relevant. I feel that is a more suitable one because it's in humans. And in monotropy, especially, I feel the social releasers ideas and monotropic ideas are more important. IWM continuity is there, but I feel in maternal deprivation that is better taken. So in maternal deprivation, Bowlby's theory, we can look at Harlow's study for support, or again Lorentz theory for study for support. Here, in my judgment, Schaffer and Emerson is better. But of course, whatever I share is from my perspective. There are many other possibilities. So the point we can give here is that there is a strength of monotropic theory, that it is supported by evidence. And then to give the example of evidence, Schaffer and Emerson have found that in their study they had many babies whom they studied thoroughly, what attachment qualities they had with their mothers. Like what Schaffer and Emerson did is, because babies are very small and they can't self report what they're experiencing towards their mother, they observe the babies. They observe the social releases being emitted by the babies, like crying, smiling, and how the mothers were responding to that. They did long term observations. And they interviewed the mothers because mothers could tell them what sort of attachment was there. What they found is, out of all the infants they studied, they had a large sample. 65% approximately did have one primary attachment figure. So they had usually the mother to whom they would release most of the social releases, so most of the time trying to get her attention, and it would be the mother who was taking care of most of their needs. The other figures who were there, like father, grandparents, siblings, they were not doing as much of a duty as the mother, and they were not being called out to as much by the baby as the mother was being called out to. Others also cared for them. There were other attachment figures, but they were not as important as the mother for the reasons I described. So now, to explain why this is a strength, this is where we link back to Bowlby's theory, because it shows there is monotropy. It's not just an idea. Empirically, Schaffer and Emerson have observed that there is one strong attachment in the baby's life, and it is stronger and more central. So definitely link-wise, it shows that Bowlby's main claim in the monotropic theory, that one main attachment has to be there in the baby's life which is more important than others. There is proof for that. Another strength is real world application, and students find application easy to remember, so definitely you can take this one. Just make sure you elaborate like it's given here. The point is, there is strong application. Evidence wise, what has happened because of Bowlby's theory? Hospital policies have changed. Earlier, many hospitals, what they would do is, for lengthy periods, they would keep the mother and baby away. Like the nurses would take care of the baby. They would let the mother and baby stay together only during feeding time. This is after the mother had delivered the baby. They used to feel for sanitary purposes, hygiene purposes, baby should be kept a little away. So they would keep them in separate rooms away from the mother under like very controlled conditions. Since Bowlby's theory came, they realized that mothers and babies need to spend time together. Then only the social releases will occur and the mother will be able to respond to them. If the baby is kept isolated from the mother, how will the mother respond to any social releases? Or if a nurse is responding occasionally to those social releases, then how will attachment form with the mother, who is going to later take charge of the baby? So, keeping that in mind, today hospitals have acknowledged that they need to give more time to stay with the children, and they are trying to increase the time as much as possible. Now, they are not too rigid about keeping the baby away. Of course, they still take care of the sanitation of the baby, but they do not unnecessarily like over precautiously keep away the babies. Sometimes also, what used to happen is like a mother has one child already and has now given birth to another child. So they would not let the first child come close to the mother for long, even if that child was very small. They would allow that child also to come to visit the mother only during visiting hours. Now, many a times they allow the mother to be with the first child also, because even that child is in the critical period many times to form that one important attachment. So, there also hospitals have become more relaxed. This shows that Bowlby's theory is not just an idea, it's not just a, like there for theoretical purposes. It has practical value. It's actually improving attachment bonds in real life. It has shaped the way hospitals are looking at attachment between mothers and babies, which is the most important area like medical care where attachment needs to be looked into. So definitely the link is this theory has very long term developmental importance. It's shaped the way development of children is being done in real life. So it's a very, very valuable and prestigious theory. Also, I forgot to mention earlier this continuity hypothesis thing. This is relevant here because why hospitals are letting good early attachments form, they've understood that in later adulthood, this all is going to matter for the individual. These ideas in the last topic, which you have in attachment, you will be able to see more of them. Not only in Bowlby's deprivation theory, but there is a last topic, early attachment to later relationships. More you will get to see about this there. So do keep such studies and such ideas in mind. They will help you to understand more easily. Now coming to the weaknesses of Bowlby's theory. One is there is too much emphasis on monotropy. No doubt monotropy is there, but not all researchers agree that monotropy is the most important thing, or throughout life that is only the one which will be influential. Others feel it's important but not as important as Bowlby has suggested. So let's see what other researchers are saying. They are saying there's an exaggeration of one attachment. Schaffer and Emerson, the same researchers whose study we saw first, in that study only what they had formed, there is a period in which that one attachment happens. But immediately after that comes another period where multiple attachments take place. So, shortly after that, one attachment becomes important, many other attachments become important. Their theory is not given to us, but they've spoken about first, there's a very general period of attachment where babies do not distinguish between living and non living things, they get attached to objects also. Then comes discriminate attachment when they realize living beings and non living things are different. Then comes monotropic attachment, where they form attachment to only one caregiver, which is same like what Bowlby said. But then after that, immediately comes a phase where they form multiple attachments. So those people whom we saw earlier, father, siblings, grandparents, they all become very important for the baby in this multiple attachment period. Not only the mother, like you can think they assume equal importance as the mother once the baby enters the multiple attachments phase. So what they are trying to say is attachment is flexible. There can be a duration where one attachment is very important, but that is not the only period. Even what happens during multiple attachment period, like a baby has strong bonds with many other people, will help them to have a happier adulthood. Like you can take a simple example. A baby who's bonded well with father, grandparents, siblings, they have good idea of how to interact with different type of people. So in adulthood also they'll find it easy to socialize and get along with others. That means even this is very important because social development is also very important. A baby unfortunately who's not had this sort of exposure to other figures beyond the mother might find it difficult to adjust with different type of people. So we need to give importance to these multiple attachments also, not just to the singular attachment. But we can give a counterpoint here. So this is the point where we can introduce a counter. Bowlby reviewed Schaffer and Emerson's research like we saw, then he came up with his theory. So he knew this aspect that there is multiple attachment later. So how he defended his theory is, he said he's not denying that multiple attachment exists. He's not denying that it is important. It's just not as important as the primary attachment. So say for example, the baby has good attachment with father, siblings, grandparents, but attachment with the mother was not good. That is going to have a greater impact on the baby than all the other multiple attachments combined. Means the baby is still going to have difficulty in adulthood despite having good relations with others. So that's why Bowlby is trying to say the primary attachment can override all other attachments. He's just trying to say it's the most important. He's not denying that multiple attachments exist. Overall, though, this point tells us that the idea of one attachment has become a little weak considering other research. Finally, for the issues and debates, a very suitable one here is determinism. We can take that. To suggest that attachment is innate, inborn, and then to say that it is critical, that one attachment is critical for all important relations in future, including romantic relations and parenting styles, shows that what someone will become as a romantic partner or a caregiver themselves is beyond their control. That means so many important things about a person's life we are saying they can do nothing about, they have no agency or choice in those things. All of it is getting shaped by how their caregiver chooses to respond to them and whether the caregiver is available or not. Mainly the claim that we cannot form an attachment in critical period that will lead to irreversible damage. That is highly deterministic. Determinism means only beyond a person's control. So such ideas are very much suggesting that a person's almost entire life or most important aspects of life are beyond their control. The problem with this, why this is a weakness, is because later on it is proven many changes can take place. Forget about research in the area. If you just look around you or if you reflect on your life or other people's lives, you might come across people who have had very poor relations with their mothers or mother figures, and still later on in life they seem to be doing well. They have good romantic relationships. They have been better as parents to their own children compared to what their parents were towards them. It's commonly observed because later on, even after having a bad relation with a parent, a person can choose to work hard. Even if initially they feel it's difficult to trust others, they can consciously choose to trust the other person, and that way they can improve their relationships. It's not all destined as such. In animals, like we saw the geese, they tend to sexually imprint on that type of figure to which they were originally imprinted. But humans are not geese. Humans have free will. They have ability to think and choose. So we cannot expect the same thing in humans. Later, when we come to the topic of early to late attachments, the last topic, like I was telling you, we will see research evidences also, in which clearly they have shown that in later life, people can choose to make better relations, even if they had not had those in their early childhood. In fact, forget about later relationships. There's this famous study of Koluchova twins. I think I came across it in Uplearn, but in many sources it is there. I'm pretty sure it is there in Professor Lawton's book. I hope I'm not wrong. Maybe in Professor Cardwell or Professor Flanagan's books also. This is quite a well-known case study. This was a case of twins who had been severely deprived from their mother figure up to 7 years of age. meaning the critical period had well surpassed, because critical period is only 2.5 years, and up till 7 years, they did not have any strong attachment. Fortunately, later they got adopted, and once they did, their adoptive parents gave them so much love, attention, and such a good environment that their intelligence was good, their ability to form relations was good. Socially, they were doing very well. There were no problems whatsoever. So, though they got all their attachment and bonding after 7 years, much after the critical period, still they were doing perfectly well, which directly contradicts Bowlby's idea of impact of deprivation, like the IWM effect, and also monotropic attachment, that one primary relation is too important for everything. The study suggests otherwise. So, overall, when we link back this determinism debate, we can say the determinism debate is very important in attachment. We need to consider it. It also comprises nature versus nurture. This theory is becoming deterministic because, I'm sorry, not nature, nurture, because this theory is becoming deterministic because it's assuming how the caregiver will act towards the child, how they will nurture the child, that is going to impact everything in their later life, which we are seeing is not always the case. So, in terms of both determinism and how it's drawing from nurture, these ideas become important to Bowlby's theory. So, this is how we can evaluate the theory. As always, I want to tell you there are many other possibilities, but these are the best points that I could come up with. That ends this video, and if you have any doubts, comments, or feedback about the video, you can leave it in the comments box below. Thank you for watching, and I'll come back soon with the next video in the series.